The air in Stone Creek Hollow clung thick and cold, a damp blanket woven from the fog that perpetually hugged the Ozark peaks. It was a weather-beaten, desolate place, a pocket of the world seemingly forgotten by the year 1879. For decades, the area had bred a strange mix of hardy independence and crippling isolation, perfect soil for secrets to take root. On the morning of October 14th, the only sound that cut through the silence was the rhythmic, sickening crunch of Sheriff Silas Thorne's boots on charred earth. The smoke had finally cleared, leaving behind a skeletal structure of a farmhouse, the former home of the Caldwell family. What remained was a scene of calculated, horrific destruction. A macabre family of 5, the father, the mother, the aging grandmother, and 2 younger siblings, all burned beyond recognition in their beds. Thorne, a man whose face was a map of every grim discovery he'd made over 20 years, knelt at the edge of the ruin. He didn't need a medical examiner to tell him this was no accident. The fire had been too precise, too fierce, and suspiciously localized to the sleeping quarters. Someone wanted to erase them. "Silas," Deputy Finn called out, his voice thin and nervous, holding a soot-stained lantern against the dim morning light. The bank records were untouched, nothing stolen. "This ain't a robbery." Thorne didn't look up. He was staring at the foundation, seeing a story in the soot patterns. "It's never about the money out here, Finn. It's always about blood or shame." The sole survivors, and the immediate suspects, were the 21-year-old twin daughters, Hazel and Hester. They were discovered 3 miles down the creek bed, huddled together in a makeshift lean-to, shivering less from cold than from profound, unnatural shock. They claimed to have been awakened by the heat and fled through the back window while the fire consumed the house. A heroic, lucky escape, except for the detail that neither twin had a single scratch, burn, or cough from smoke inhalation. Their clothing, though dirty, was intact. Thorne remembered the twins. They were whispers in the community long before the fire. Born of a truth too ugly for the narrow valley, a truth that had been sealed up in the Caldwell farmhouse like a pestilence. Their mother, rumored to be their mother's sister, their father, their uncle. The details were always muddled by gossip and fear, but the central, inescapable fact was the incestuous bond that birthed them. They were seen as tainted, kept hidden, and only ever appearing in town as 2 silent, mirroring shadows. At the temporary morgue, the old church basement, Thorne interviewed Hazel first. She was the slightly bolder of the 2, her eyes a watery, unsettling blue that refused to meet his. "Tell me what happened, Hazel," Thorne said, his voice flat, professional. She spoke in a near whisper, her hands clenched in her lap. "The heat. It was so hot. Hester woke me. We saw the glow under the door. We ran. Did you try to wake anyone else?" A long silence. Her eyes finally flicked up, meeting his for a split second, a flash of something unreadable, not grief, not fear, but a brittle, cold resignation. "The house was old, Sheriff. The fire. It moved too fast. It took them instantly. We couldn't go back." "Where did the fire start?" Hazel pressed her lips together, hesitating. "Downstairs, near the stove." Thorne leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Finn said the fire damage was minimal downstairs. It was focused upstairs, in the bedrooms, almost as if something was poured on the beds." Hazel looked away, her silence suddenly heavier than any answer. Later, Thorne interviewed Hester. Hester was the quieter, more fragile-looking twin, but her quietness felt like a carefully constructed dam holding back a dangerous torrent. She recited the exact same account as Hazel, word for word, pause for pause. It was a perfectly rehearsed lie. "Hester," Thorne said softly, "your father, your mother. They kept you isolated. They treated you badly, didn't they?" Her chin trembled. She shook her head, a denial that lacked conviction. "They were all you ever knew." Thorne continued, applying pressure. "But you were trapped. You hated it." Hester finally spoke, her voice a raw rasp. "They were sick. The house was sick. It was all rotting." Thorne felt a chill that had nothing to do with the church basement. He knew the twins didn't start the fire because they hated their isolation. They started it because they were terrified of what they were becoming inside that isolation. They burned the family not out of rage, but out of a desperate, terrifying need for cleansing. He turned to Deputy Finn, the setting sun catching the resolve in his eyes. "Lock them up, Finn. Separate cells. Until I find out what really happened in that house, and why those children felt they had no choice but to erase their own history." The fire was over, but the true horror had just begun. If you are enjoying this dark journey into the Ozark mystery, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. The isolation of the jailhouse was a palpable thing, a heavy silence broken only by the drip of water and the distant lonely cry of an owl. Sheriff Thorne had separated the twins, a tactical move designed to break their synchronized defense. He knew their strength lay in their unity, a codependency forged by years of shared ostracism and a common, horrific origin. The morning after the fire, Thorne pored over the few surviving artifacts from the Caldwell homestead. The most telling piece of evidence was a diary, half-burned, retrieved from under the floorboards of the parents' bedroom, a place Hazel and Hester wouldn't have frequented. It belonged to the grandmother, a woman named Ilara. Her script was shaky, frantic, a testament to a mind slowly unraveling under the weight of the family's truth. The entries didn't speak of fire or death, but of an escalating internal terror. They documented the increasing instability of the family patriarch, the father who was also the uncle, a man named Jed. Ilara wrote of Jed's possessive paranoia, his fear that the outside world would discover the incestuous origins of the twins. She described the house not as a home, but a cage, sealed by shame and guarded by Jed's escalating brutality. October 9th. Jed is drinking. He sees the devil in the girl's eyes now. He says their shared face is a judgment on us all. He keeps the rifle closer. I fear what he will do to them before he can do it to himself. October 12th. Hester is getting thin. Hazel stares at the wall for hours. They are silent things, but the house is not. It breathes with their quiet rage. Jed is planning something. He says the sin must be purged. Thorne's gut tightened. Jed wasn't afraid of the outside world. He was afraid of his own creation, the living proof of his depravity. The diary suggested Jed was the primary threat, and the twins' escape was less an act of murder and more an act of self-preservation. But the fire was too complete for an accident. It felt like a final, definitive stroke. He returned to Hester's cell. She sat on the edge of the cot, hands folded, her posture perfect yet brittle. "Hester," Thorne began, holding up a small, charred wooden bird they found near the ruins. "This was your little brother Micah's toy. Did you see him before you left the house?" Her eyes, those unsettling blue depths, darted to the bird. And for the first time, Thorne saw a flicker of genuine, agonizing pain. It was a crack in the mirror. He was asleep. "Was Jed, your father, asleep?" She swallowed hard. "I don't know." "Did you see the lamp knocked over? Did you hear a struggle?" Hester's breathing grew shallow. I saw him, standing at the door." "Jed?" "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The other one." Thorne felt a cold prickle on his neck. The other one could only mean Hazel. Hazel was standing at the door. Hester shook her head again, burying her face in her hands, her whole body shaking. "We don't talk about it, we promised." The internal conflict was tearing her apart. The truth was leaking out, not through words, but through her sheer physical distress. The twins' bond wasn't just shared love, it was a shared covenant of silence, a pact to protect a secret more horrifying than the fire itself. Meanwhile, Deputy Finn was having trouble with Hazel. She was calm, perhaps too calm, demanding a lawyer, a demand unheard of in this isolated, lawless corner of the Ozarks. She was performing the role of the unjustly accused victim with chilling precision. Thorne realized the psychological game was twofold. The twins were manipulating the investigation, and, more disturbingly, They were locked in an internal battle of dominance and submission. Hazel was the rock, Hester the fracture. That evening, a storm rolled in, battering the small jailhouse. Thorne sat alone rereading Ilara's diary. The final half-burnt entry was not dated, but it was positioned just before the last scorched page. The twins whispered to each other all night, a language only they know. They are not children, they are judges. Jed will bring ruin, but I believe the girls will ensure it. They are preparing the clean slate. God help us all when the fire comes. Thorne slammed the journal shut. The fire wasn't a spontaneous act of rage. It was a deliberate, cold-blooded execution planned by two people who had reached a breaking point of isolation and horror. But if they planned it together, why was Hester breaking? And why did Hazel seem so unnaturally stable? He had to get them talking, not about the fire, but about the incest, the shame and the shared horror of their childhood. The key wasn't how they set the fire, but why they felt justified in setting it. The truth lay in the cracks in the mirror, in the slight but vital difference between the personalities of Hazel and Hester. Thorne stood up, the jailhouse door rattling from the wind. He decided to confront Hazel, not with evidence of the fire, but with the terrifying prospect of losing her sister. He needed to break the stronger one to save the weaker. The wind howled like a mournful spirit, echoing the silent terror locked within the stone walls. The stage was set for the deep, ugly secrets of Stone Creek Hollow to finally be dragged into the light. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the Ozark scrubbed clean, the air crisp and deceitfully peaceful. Sheriff Thorne focused his attention on Hazel, the twin whose composure was less a sign of innocence and more a mask of iron will. He sat across from her in the small interrogation room, the oil lamp casting long, severe shadows. "I've spoken to Hester," Thorne said, watching her closely. Hazel's jaw tightened, the only visible sign of stress. "She's frightened. I asked to see her. She's frightened of losing you, Hazel. Frightened of breaking the pact." Hazel met his gaze directly, her eyes cold. "There is no pact, Sheriff. We simply share the truth. The truth is, you ran from a fire you started, but the truth I'm looking for is why you felt the need to burn the very people who created you." Thorne opened the charred diary, placing it on the table. "Your grandmother, Ilara. She wrote about the shame, the isolation, and your father, Jed's, increasing volatility. She wrote about the sin that birthed you." Hazel flinched at the word sin, her composure faltering for a brief, crucial moment. "You grew up knowing you were different," Thorne pressed on, his voice low and empathetic, a calculated performance. "You were locked away because of the truth of your incestuous birth. Jed didn't treat you like daughters, he treated you like possessions, symbols of his shame and his control." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy, forcing her to confront the ugly history. "Ilara wrote that Jed was planning to purge the sin. What was Jed planning to do to you and Hester, Hazel? Was he going to hurt you?" Hazel's voice was strained, a tight wire ready to snap. "He was getting worse. The drinking, the rage. He would lock us in the cellar for days. He told us we were monsters, that our shared face was an affront to God. Did you believe him?" "We believed he was a monster," she countered, the hostility raw now. "He was the one who poisoned the well, not us." Thorne leaned back, changing tact. "Hester told me she saw the other one standing at the door." Hazel's face went rigid. Hester is confused, the shock. "No, Hazel. She was clear. She meant you. The other one is how you two differentiate yourselves in private, isn't it? The one who is strong, and the one who is frail." This hit the mark. Hazel's breathing hitched. The investigation was now purely psychological, a probe into the twisted dynamics of their shared identity. "You decided you had to act," Thorne continued, piecing together the events not just from the evidence, but from the architecture of their shame. "Jed was threatening the family, threatening you. You and Hester knew no one would help you in Stone Creek Hollow. They already judged you. So you became your own judges, your own executioners. We simply survived." Hazel insisted, her words losing their conviction. "He would have killed us. And the others? Your mother, your grandmother, your younger siblings? Did they deserve to be erased to ensure your survival?" Hazel pushed her chair back, the scrape of violent interruption of the silence. She stood, trembling. They stood by. They let him do it. They were all part of the house of sickness. They were all complicit in the way we were kept, hidden and hated. Her voice rose to a hysterical shriek, finally breaking the careful facade. We had to cleanse it. We had to leave a clean slate. She collapsed back into the chair, sobbing, her rigid control dissolving into a mass of wrenching grief and terrifying relief. The confession wasn't about the fire. It was about the years of psychological imprisonment and the necessity of the murder for their freedom. Thorne knew he had the motive. The two girls, victims of horrific abuse and incest, had executed a desperate, meticulous plan to destroy the source of their trauma. But the details of the crime itself remained hazy, obscured by their shared story of fleeing. He looked at the wreckage of the confident twin. "How did you do it, Hazel? How did you ensure everyone was asleep? Where did you get the accelerant?" Hazel lifted her head, her face tear-streaked but suddenly clearer, eerily calm again. "I didn't do it, Sheriff. We did it." She smiled then, a small, chilling smile that was entirely without warmth, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "There is no other one. There is only us." The use of us was a psychological confirmation of their shared personality, a single, unified, murderous mind operating within two bodies. The twin identity was their weapon and their shield. Thorne left the cell, feeling the heavy, unnerving weight of their mutual gaze. He needed a way to physically break their shared reality, to find a witness who could place a single twin at the scene of the crime alone. The motive was clear: survival and vengeance against a life of being treated like a monster. Now, he had to prove the act. He had to find the accelerant, the one realistic element that would tie the architecture of shame directly to the act of arson. The trail led him back to the outskirts of Stone Creek Hollow, to the nearest community where the Caldwells might have, in their rare trips, acquired the means of their destruction. The suspense wasn't in if they did it, but in the method, a calculated step-by-step process of their horrifying liberation. Sheriff Thorne rode out of Stone Creek Hollow towards the small trading post of Red Oak Bend, a dusty cluster of buildings about a 3-hour ride through the rough Ozark terrain. He was hunting for a specific item: kerosene. While the Caldwells used old oil lamps, the extensive damage upstairs suggested a powerful accelerant. Kerosene, expensive but potent, was the most likely candidate, and the Red Oak Bend General Store was the only place within a day's ride that stocked it in bulk. The general store was run by Mabel Jenkins, a woman with eyes that missed nothing and a tongue that ran faster than the creek. Thorne dismissed her before heading to the blacksmith, Abraham "Abe" Coulter. Abe was a massive man, solid and gruff, who rarely spoke but saw every soul who passed through the bend. "Abe," Thorne said, leaning against the hot anvil, the smell of burnt metal thick in the air. "I need to know if anyone from Stone Creek Hollow came through here 2 weeks ago, maybe bought anything unusual." Abe slowly wiped his brow with a calloused hand. "They're a close-knit bunch down there, Sheriff. Only see 'em when they need shoes or salt." "The Caldwells," Thorne clarified. "The ones who lived up on Stone Creek Hill. The ones who kept to themselves." Abe stopped working. The silence was the only answer Thorne needed. Everyone knew the Caldwell shame. "The girls," Abe finally rumbled, his voice like stones grinding together. "One of 'em was here, about 10, 12 days back, alone. That's why I remember." Thorne felt a jolt of urgency. "Which one, Abe? Hazel or Hester?" Abe frowned, shaking his large head. "Can't say, Sheriff. They look like 2 peas in a pod. Quiet. Had a large sack. Came in on a borrowed mule. The one who usually comes is the old man, Jed." "What did she buy?" Abe pointed a thick finger towards a corner of his shop. "She bought a new set of iron straps. Said their water barrel hoop had rotted. Paid in full. Then she went to Mabel's store and bought 3 large cans of kerosene. Thorne walked over to the spot where Abe had been pointing. In the corner, among scraps of iron, was a small broken clay doll, its head cleanly snapped off. "Did she drop this?" Thorne asked, picking it up. "Must have. I swept up after she left. Thought it belonged to one of the Valley kids." The doll, simple and handmade, was identical to a set of 3 found near the Caldwell ruins. Toys belonging to the younger siblings. The twin who came here hadn't been focused on water barrels. She was focused on an exit strategy. The kerosene was the means. The iron straps were a credible cover story, and the broken doll was a psychological slip, a tiny piece of the younger siblings she was about to erase. Crucially, only one twin had been here. This broke their synchronized alibi. Thorne rode back, the setting sun painting the clouds a violent orange. He couldn't shake the image of the clay doll. The twin who made the purchase had gone through the mundane motions of planning a mass murder, even dropping a toy belonging to one of her innocent victims. This wasn't a sudden, chaotic crime. It was a cold, deliberate act. He went straight to the jailhouse, marching past Deputy Finn. He entered Hester's cell. "I found this," Thorne said, holding out the broken clay doll, "near the blacksmith shop at Red Oak Bend. You were there, Hester, 10 days ago. You bought 3 cans of kerosene." Hester didn't flinch, but her eyes welled up instantly, a profound sorrow mixing with an old terror. "The doll, it was mine. I made them for Micah and Sarah." "You went alone," Thorne insisted. "You are the one who secured the accelerant. Your sister, Hazel, was not with you." Hester shook her head violently, the denial a desperate tremor. "We are never apart. We cannot be apart. We are the same, Sheriff. We do everything together." "But you weren't there with her then. You weren't at the blacksmith's. She was there. Hazel was the one who prepared the fire, Hester. Hazel is the one who took the first step toward murder." Hester stared at him, her face a mask of conflict. Her deep-seated fear was being exploited, the fear that her sister was the dominant, destructive force in their shared identity. "It had to be done," Hester whispered, her voice barely a breath. "He was going to hurt us. He was going to cut it out of us." Thorne felt the true weight of the horror. Jed wasn't just planning to hurt them, he was likely planning a form of brutal, ritualistic mutilation to purge the sin of their shared bloodline. The fire was an act of preemptive defense against a horrific, impending violence. "So Hazel went to Red Oak Bend alone," Thorne pressed, a final time. "She planned the escape. She bought the fire. She led." Hester burst into tears, not of guilt, but of relief and terror. She told me it was my turn to be the strong one, that night. But I couldn't." Thorne's mind raced. If Hazel made the purchase, she was the primary actor. But Hester's confession was a lie of omission, a subtle manipulation. She was protecting the reality of their shared plan by diverting the sole responsibility onto her stronger twin. He left Hester sobbing and went to Hazel's cell. He held up the doll. "Red Oak Bend," Thorne stated flatly. 10 days ago, kerosene, the broken doll. Hester made the purchase. She was the one who broke the doll belonging to her little brother. Hazel's composure shattered, not with tears but with a sharp, inhaled gasp of disbelief, her eyes widening in a terrifying flash of betrayal. "She said," Hazel stammered, her voice shaking with sudden, uncontrolled rage. "She said she lost it. She promised me she lost it near the creek when we ran. She promised me it was gone." The true fracture was revealed. They were not a single mind. They were 2, bound by shared trauma, one dominant and one submissive, and the submissive one, Hester, had just planted the ultimate seed of doubt and culpability on her sister. Hazel's carefully constructed defense was crumbling, betrayed not by evidence, but by her other half. The horrifying truth was that Hester was not the weak one, she was the cunning one, using her perceived fragility as a weapon. The air in the jailhouse was now electric, with a tension thicker than the recent smoke. Sheriff Thorne had successfully fractured the twins' impenetrable psychological fortress. Hazel was reeling from the perceived betrayal. her anger a volatile force. Hester, having delivered her calculated truth, was now eerily quiet, resting in the safety of her perceived fragility. Thorne's investigation shifted from who committed the murder to how the shared identity orchestrated it and who held the true power. He returned to the ruin, this time with a new pair of eyes, searching not for accelerant residue, which was long gone, but for structural details that would reveal the plan's execution. The Caldwell farmhouse was old, built with uneven floors. Thorne noticed something strange near the staircase. The floorboards leading to the upstairs bedrooms were slicked with a thick layer of axle grease and animal fat, covered by a thin layer of dust. "Finn, look at this," Thorne pointed, scraping the residue with his knife. This wasn't here to burn. This was here to impede. If the fire had started upstairs, as the damage suggested, and the family had tried to escape down the main staircase, the grease would have sent them tumbling, ensuring they couldn't reach the lower floor or the rear exit where the twins supposedly fled. It was a human trap, a deliberate physical obstacle designed to guarantee the fire's lethality. This act of cold-blooded mechanical calculation pointed squarely back to Hazel. She was the practical, rigid twin, the one who planned the how. But the emotional weight of the act, the need for cleansing, still felt rooted in their shared terror. Thorne returned to Hazel, who was now pacing her cell like a trapped predator, her fury focused entirely on her sister. "The truth is out, Hazel," Thorne stated, holding none of the previous empathy. The grease on the stairs, the iron straps to cover the sound of the kerosene cans, the timing. You orchestrated the escape, but you also orchestrated the entrapment. Hazel stopped pacing, leaning against the bars, her eyes burning. He would have taken us apart, piece by piece. We were suffocating in that house. You don't understand what it's like to be born of a sickness and treated like a curse. "I understand survival," Thorne conceded. "But you planned to eliminate everyone, even your grandmother who tried to warn you, and your younger siblings who were also victims. They were tainted," Hazel shrieked, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "They were another generation of the Caldwell sin. The sickness had to stop with us." This was the core motive, not just survival, but a terrifying, righteous conviction that they had to end their bloodline to break the cycle of horror and shame. They saw the fire not as murder, but as a surgical necessity. "You believe you were justified," Thorne said. "But your sister, Hester, the one who risked everything to buy the kerosene, she betrayed you. She confessed to me that you made the purchase, but she broke the clay doll. That small, careless detail of the broken toy, that was your true weakness, Hazel. Your trust in her." Hazel slammed her fist against the bars. "She lies. She is the weak one. I planned it, yes. I was the strong one, but she agreed. We were going to go together." The horrifying truth emerged. The betrayal wasn't about who bought the kerosene, but about which twin was supposed to take the blame. "You told her it was her turn to be the strong one that night." Thorne recalled Hester's earlier words. "Did you mean it was her turn to lead the fire?" A chilling realization dawned on Thorne. The entire escape narrative, the perfect rehearsed alibi, was designed to cover up a deeper truth. One of them was meant to die. He walked to Hester's cell, her door standing a few feet from Hazel's. "Hester," Thorne said, keeping his voice carefully neutral. "Hazel told me you both agreed to go together, but you said she told you it was your turn to be the strong one. What did she ask you to do that night?" Hester looked up, her expression a mix of relief and terror. She said we would light the lamps, all of them, and then we would go down to the cellar and wait for the house to be clean." "Wait? Why the cellar?" "It's stone," Hester whispered. "She said the fire would be fierce, but the cellar would hold. She said we would be purified, that we would have to sacrifice ourselves to end the sin." Thorne felt a cold wave wash over him. The escape was a lie. The original plan was a double suicide, a final, horrific shared act of purification and vengeance. "But you didn't go to the cellar," Thorne said, his mind racing to the evidence. "You ran out the window and down the creek bed. Why?" Hester shook her head, tears streaming down her face again. I saw the flame from the lamp. It was beautiful and terrifying, and I thought I was finally free of Jed, free of the house, free of the sin, and I ran. I looked back, and Hazel was right behind me. Hazel, overhearing the conversation, screamed from her cell, a sound of pure, anguished rage. "Liar! You were supposed to wait. You were supposed to stay. I was supposed to leave the body." The final gruesome twist. The double suicide was a lie. Hazel, the mastermind, had intended to kill Hester by having her stay in the cellar, making it look like a tragic, purified death, while Hazel escaped alone to start a new life. But Hester, the weak one, the victim, had instinctively bolted, forcing Hazel to abandon her own plan and chase after her sister, maintaining the shared identity to survive the immediate threat of the outside world. The real betrayal wasn't the broken doll or the purchase of kerosene. It was the moment of self-preservation that broke their fatal bond, leaving Hazel enraged and Hester alive, yet haunted by the realization that her twin's loyalty had limits. Thorne now had the full, devastating motive and the mechanism of the crime. The entire narrative was a calculated effort to conceal the truth of Hazel's planned single survival and Hester's impulsive failure to die. The suspense now lay in the consequences of this fractured bond. The revelation of Hazel's planned single survival, her intention to make Hester the final sacrifice in their purification pact, had broken the last remnants of their shared psychological defense. The jailhouse was a cauldron of hate and fear. Hazel, consumed by fury and betrayal, began to talk, not to confess, but to condemn Hester. Sheriff Thorne, exploiting this raw rift, brought a stenographer to Hazel's cell to document her statement. The goal was to secure a complete, realistic narrative of the events, tied to the physical evidence, the kerosene, the grease, and the location of the bodies. "You said you planned to leave Hester's body behind," Thorne prompted, his gaze steady on Hazel. Hazel's eyes were dry and vacant, staring past the iron bars. She was the one who bought the kerosene. That was her test. She failed the first test when she was born. I needed her to pass this one. The test of being the strong one was the test of dying for both of you, Thorne translated grimly. It was the only way to be completely clean, Hazel whispered. One of us had to be the pure victim, the one who sacrificed their life to end the lineage. I am the clever one. I am the one who could survive outside. She was only meant for the house of sin. Hazel then laid out the details of the crime with clinical precision. 1. Preparation. 10 days prior. Hester, under Hazel's instruction, traveled to Red Oak Bend, purchased the 3 large cans of kerosene and the iron straps for the cover story. The broken clay doll was Hester's final emotional break before committing to the act, a moment she carefully hid from Hazel. 2. The trap. Night of the fire. Hazel applied the grease-fat mixture to the stairs while the family slept. This ensured if they woke, they would fall, giving the fire time to engulf the bedrooms. 3. The execution. Just before dawn, the twins entered the upstairs rooms. Hazel poured the kerosene lavishly on the parents' and grandmother's beds. Hester poured it on the beds of the younger siblings, Micah and Sarah. 4. The final pact. Hazel led Hester to the stone cellar. She ignited the parents' room first, a visual cue of the start. She told Hester to stay in the cellar and pray for purification, promising she would follow once the house was engulfed. The truth was, Hazel planned to seal the cellar door and escape. When I lit the flame, I looked at her, Hazel recounted, a strange, proud tone entering her voice. She was beautiful in the light. I thought, she finally did something right. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw her running up the stairs. She was screaming, not loud, but a thin, terrified sound. She chose life over purity. She chose betrayal. Thorne had the full, gruesome story. The crime was a product of years of psychological abuse, turning the twins into self-appointed agents of vengeance and purification. The fire was a brutal, realistic ending to a lifetime of trauma. However, The case was still weak on physical proof that only Hazel was responsible for the planned murder-suicide. The twins were still connected by the kerosene purchase and the shared act of pouring it. Thorne needed to leverage Hazel's one remaining motivation: absolute control over the narrative. The town of Stone Creek Hollow and the courts will see you both as equally guilty, Thorne said, leaning closer. A jury will see the incest, the fire, and the two of you standing together. They will see only monsters. Hazel recoiled at the word. We are not monsters, we were the victims. I stopped the sickness, I should be celebrated. You will hang together, Hazel, Thorne stated flatly, unless you help me solidify the truth, that you were the mastermind, and Hester was a terrified victim of both Jed and you. Hazel stared at him, her mind working furiously. The idea of hanging next to the sister who betrayed her was a fate worse than death. It was a final, complete loss of control. What do you want? She asked, her voice tight with suppressed panic. I need something physical, something that proves Hester was merely an unwilling pawn in your plan, not an equal partner. Something that proves you intended to leave her to die. Hazel's eyes darted to the window, then back to Thorne. A dark, cunning intelligence flickered back into life. The cellar, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The latch on the cellar door. I had Finn replace it after we found the cellar open, but the old latch is in my coat pocket. The latch was broken from the inside. She fought to get out. The twins who ran out the window, they didn't break a latch. The latch breaker was the one I tried to leave behind. Thorne's heart pounded. This was the final devastating piece of physical evidence. A latch, broken from the inside, proving that one of the twins, Hester, had been imprisoned in the cellar after the fire was started, only escaping by shattering the locking mechanism. This would confirm Hazel's betrayal and Hester's victim status in the final, brutal moments. Thorne retrieved the old, tarnished latch from the pocket of Hazel's muddy coat. The metal was indeed bent and warped in a way that suggested forceful, desperate struggle from the inner side of the door. He had the confession, the motive, the method, and the definitive evidence of Hazel's calculated malice. Hester was no longer just an equal partner in the crime. She was a victim who, by sheer desperate will, survived both her father and her twin sister. Hazel leaned back, a twisted sense of accomplishment filling her face. Now they know the truth. I am the one who cleaned the world. She is just the collateral. Thorne didn't respond. He simply collected the documents and the broken latch. The truth was far more complex than a simple murder. It was a chilling, realistic exploration of how trauma and isolation could forge a shared identity capable of the most horrific yet calculated acts of self-preservation. With Hazel's detailed confession and the discovery of the broken cellar latch, Sheriff Thorne had the evidence necessary to prosecute. He had isolated Hazel as the primary orchestrator and Hester as a terrified accomplice and near victim. The legal path was clear, but the human cost was immeasurable. Thorne needed a final, comprehensive statement from Hester, one that acknowledged the full, terrifying scope of her twins' plan and her own terrifying escape. He met her in her cell. She was cleaner now, dressed in simple borrowed clothes, but the unseen scars of her life were visible in the fragility of her hands and the haunted depths of her eyes. Hester, Thorne began gently, placing the broken latch on the table. Hazel confessed. She told me the plan, the fire, the grease, the cellar. Hester didn't look at the latch. She looked at Thorne, a profound sadness in her gaze. She tried to kill me. It wasn't a question, but a quiet, accepted fact. She told me we were going to be purified together, but she meant to leave me in the stone, to be the clean memory. Why did you pour the kerosene on your younger siblings, Micah and Sarah, Hester? Thorne asked, the toughest question of all. Her eyes finally filled with tears, true, genuine grief this time. They were already dead, she whispered, the words shaking her whole body. Jed. He woke up when we were pouring. He saw us. He didn't scream at the fire. He screamed at us. He grabbed his rifle. Hazel saw it coming. She picked up a heavy piece of firewood, and she struck him. Thorne felt a cold shock. A blow, not a fire. This was a crucial new detail. The initial act of violence was not the fire, but a homicidal defense. Jed was incapacitated. Hester shook her head slowly. He was dead. He fell hard. The noise woke the grandmother, and she grabbed Micah and Sarah and she smothered them. Right there, on the floor. She screamed that the taint must not be allowed to live, that the fire was a gift from God, but she wouldn't trust it. She killed them. Thorne leaned back, stunned. The fire was not the primary cause of death for all the victims. Jed was killed by blunt force trauma, and the younger siblings were smothered by their own grandmother. A horrific act of religious fanaticism driven by decades of guilt and the terror of Jed's death. The mother, he deduced, was likely incapacitated or killed by Jed's initial rage before the blow. The fire was then set to erase the evidence of the entire implosion of the Caldwell family. Hazel saw all this, Thorne deduced. We both did, Hester corrected, her voice firm. We saw the real sickness of the house. We saw that Jed and the grandmother, they were the true destroyers. The fire was just the final curtain. This explained the intensity of the fire, the precision of the kerosene. The twins weren't just murderers. They were witnesses and survivors of a sudden, brutal event, using the fire to cover up the immediate non-arson deaths within the family. Why didn't you tell me this before, Hester? Because Hazel said the truth of the sickness had to die with the house, she said, meeting his gaze. If the world knew what they did to each other, to us, they would call us mad. It's easier to be called murderers than to reveal the truth of the rot in Stone Creek Hollow. But when she tried to kill me, I knew the pact was broken. She became just like them. She wanted to destroy me. The psychological complexity was immense. The fire was a three-layered crime. A defense against Jed, an act of cleansing by the grandmother, and finally an escape attempt and a planned twin murder by Hazel. Thorne knew a jury would never separate these facts. The simple truth, incest, fire, and dead bodies, would convict them both. Hester, Thorne said, his voice dropping to a confidential level, I believe you, but the jury will not. They will see the two of you as a single unit. Hazel must take the blame for the fire and for the intent to murder you. You must present yourself as the traumatized victim, the one who tried to warn the others, the one who fought for her life against both the house and her sister. Hester nodded, her determination settling like stone. Her survival instincts, once repressed, were now fully engaged. She would use the truth of the grandmother's actions and Hazel's betrayal to paint a realistic portrait of a traumatized victim, ensuring her freedom. Thorne stood up. The sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows into the cell. He had the full, realistic narrative, one of the most complex he'd ever encountered. It wasn't a story of supernatural horror, but the deepest, darkest kind of human terror. The mystery is solved, but the suspense of the trial is next. If you are gripped by the dark truth of the Ozarks, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for the final chilling chapters. The air in the courthouse in the nearby town of Hollow Springs was thick with anticipation, fear, and morbid curiosity. The case of the Caldwell twins had spread like wildfire, capturing the grim attention of the entire region. The people of the Ozarks were not shocked by the incest. They were shocked by the scale of the resulting violence. Sheriff Thorne, though not a prosecutor, bore the weight of the badge and the responsibility for presenting a clear, coherent narrative. He knew the truth. The three-layered crime, the grandmother's horrific smothering, Hazel's planned twin murder, was too convoluted and too psychologically damaging for a 1879 jury. He had to construct a story of realistic human drama that would secure justice while saving the life of the less culpable twin, Hester. Thorne met with the district attorney, a young, ambitious man named Robert Finch. We charge Hazel with 5 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder against her sister Hester, Thorne stated, laying out the evidence. Hazel's confession, the kerosene purchase, the grease on the stairs, and the broken cellar latch. "And Hester?" Finch asked, reviewing the documents. "Hester is a victim," Thorne insisted. "An accomplice under extreme duress, yes, but ultimately a survivor. She was traumatized and obeyed her dominant sister. Her escape from the cellar, evidenced by the broken latch, proves her will to live and her rejection of Hazel's final deadly plan." Finch, sensing the public's appetite for a simple narrative, was skeptical. "They both poured the kerosene, Sheriff. That's a clear admission of guilt. They poured it on bodies that were already dead or incapacitated," Thorne countered, though he chose not to reveal the full, gruesome details of the grandmother's actions, keeping the focus on Jed's death and Hazel's malicious intent. "They poured it to erase the shame, not to kill. Hazel's intent was to kill her sister and escape alone. That's where the malice lies." The trial began, a grim spectacle of rural justice. Hazel was led in, maintaining a chilling, composed silence, occasionally flashing a look of pure loathing at her sister. Hester, dressed in black, played the role of the terrified, fragile victim perfectly, her tears genuine, her sorrow profound. Thorne's testimony was the centerpiece. He detailed the incestuous origins, the isolation, and the brutality of Jed Caldwell. He painted the Caldwell home not as a dwelling, but as a prison of shame, justifying the twins' desperation. He then focused on Hazel's premeditation, the kerosene purchase, the greased stairs, and the meticulously planned double suicide-turned-murder of Hester. The moment of highest suspense came when the broken cellar latch was presented. Thorne described how Hester was locked in the cellar, forced to witness the flames above her, and how she used every ounce of her remaining strength to break the iron lock and claw her way to freedom and the waiting arms of her sister. During the cross-examination, Hazel's defense lawyer, a court-appointed public defender, tried to shift the blame back onto Hester, citing her role in buying the kerosene and pouring it. "Isn't it true, Sheriff," the lawyer pressed, "that Hester was the one who left a clue at the blacksmith's, the broken doll, a sign of her own guilt and subsequent remorse?" Thorne saw the dangerous pivot. He had to protect Hester's fragile position. "No," Thorne stated firmly, looking directly at the jury. "The doll was evidence of a planned execution. The doll was a psychological casualty of a murder planned by Hazel, who used her sister's desperate need for acceptance to manipulate her into buying the means of destruction. Hester was so traumatized by the abuse and her sister's control that she only followed orders, believing she was participating in a shared act of cleansing, not a single murder." Hester, witnessing this defense, wept silently. The weight of Thorne's constructed truth, a necessary lie to secure her freedom, was heavy on her soul. The prosecution rested. The narrative was simple, tragic, and terrifying. Two girls raised in a horror, one of them, Hazel, becoming as monstrous as her tormentors, attempting to erase her sister as the final terrible act of control. Hazel's rage finally boiled over during the defense's brief, desperate attempt to shift the focus. She stood up, slamming her hands on the table, her voice ringing with hysterical fury. "She is a liar," Hazel shrieked, pointing at Hester. "She was the one who wanted the fire. She told me she couldn't stand the smell of the house, the smell of the blood. We were supposed to go together. She betrayed me. She ran." The entire courtroom erupted in horrified silence. Hazel's outburst, though truthful, only solidified her image as the unstable, malevolent one, completely destroying her defense. Her uncontrollable rage was proof of the malicious intent Thorne had described. The jury was sent out. Thorne watched Hester, her face a mask of grief. She had survived the fire, the incest, and her twins' murderous plan. But the terror of the Ozarks would never leave her. She was free, but irrevocably broken. The justice system was about to deliver a verdict on a crime that was purely human, psychological, and utterly devastating. The jury was out for only 4 hours, a remarkably short time that signaled a clear, unified decision. When they returned, the tension in the courtroom was suffocating. Sheriff Thorne watched the foreman, a stern-faced farmer, deliver the verdict. Hazel Caldwell was found guilty on all counts, including the 5 counts of murder and the attempted murder of her sister Hester. The meticulous evidence of premeditation, the greased stairs, the broken latch, the final confession of planned single survival was too damning. Hester Caldwell was found not guilty. The jury accepted the narrative of the traumatized, controlled victim, a vulnerable girl who suffered under both her incestuous family and the murderous dominant will of her twin sister. Her tears, her fragility, and the compelling evidence of her desperate escape from the cellar secured her freedom. Hazel received the news with a cold, terrifying calm, her fury having receded into a chilling emptiness. As she was led away, she locked eyes with Hester for the final time. It was a look of profound contempt and finality, a silent vow of eternal separation. Hester, free but destroyed, collapsed into a wave of quiet, racking sobs. The legal nightmare was over, but the psychological horror of being the sole survivor of her entire Macabre family, freed by the deliberate destruction of her own twin, had just begun. In the days that followed, the story consumed the region. Hazel Caldwell was sentenced to death by hanging. Her crime was seen not just as murder, but as a deliberate demonic act of parricide, a violation of the sacred family unit, regardless of its incestuous rot. Sheriff Thorne, exhausted and haunted, visited Hazel in her cell one last time before she was transported to the state penitentiary. "Are you satisfied, Hazel?" Thorne asked, standing outside the bars. "You've successfully ended the line. You were the agent of the cleansing." Hazel looked up, a ghost of the intelligent, cunning woman she was. "I am satisfied that she did not win," she said, her voice dry. "She chose life over the covenant. She chose to be a liar and a survivor. She will never be clean, Sheriff. She will live with the memory of the kerosene and the image of me and the knowledge that she ran. She is a ghost who walks the earth, and I will be at peace." Her final words confirmed the horrifying truth. Hazel's ultimate revenge was not the fire, but the psychological burden she successfully placed on Hester. By surviving, Hester didn't win freedom. She won a life sentence of guilt, trauma, and isolation. Thorne never saw Hazel again. She was taken away, an indelible stain on the history of the Ozarks. Hester, meanwhile, was given a small amount of money collected by the fearful, pitying community. She left Hollow Springs immediately, disappearing into the vast anonymity of the American West. She was a ghost walking away from the ashes of her history. Thorne felt a profound sense of failure. He had secured the legal justice, but he had failed to save Hester from her own mind. She was free from the Caldwell family, but not free from Hazel. 1 month later, Thorne received a letter from a small town in Oregon. It was from a small-town doctor. The letter was addressed to the sheriff of Stone Creek Hollow. The note was brief and clinical. "A woman matching the description of Hester Caldwell was admitted to our clinic. She showed symptoms of profound delusional distress. She claimed her twin sister Hazel was still inside her, speaking to her. She was found in a remote cabin, having attempted to self-mutilate in an attempt to cut the sickness out. She died shortly after." Thorne stared at the letter, the paper shaking in his hand. Hester hadn't been killed by the fire or the hangman. She had been killed by her own mind, by the internalized horror and the inescapable ghost of Hazel. Hazel's last words were prophetic. Hester would never be clean, never be free. He stood up, walking to his window. The Ozark peaks looked indifferent, silent custodians of the valley's secrets. He realized the fire had never truly ended the Caldwell horror. It had simply displaced it, pushing the psychological terror into the fragile mind of the survivor. The most terrifying truth was that the strongest bonds, even those born of incest and trauma, were the hardest to break. The death of Hester Caldwell far across the country provided the chilling, tragic closure to the case that Sheriff Silas Thorne had secretly feared. The legacy of the incestuous Caldwell family was not merely the charred ruin in Stone Creek Hollow, but the total, irreversible psychological destruction of the twins. Hazel, the mastermind, achieved her final victory through the guilt and madness of her surviving sister. Thorne never spoke of the letter from Oregon. To the Ozark community, Hazel was hanged, and Hester, the poor, traumatized victim, had simply moved on, a sad footnote in their dark history. Thorne allowed the local legend to settle. Two disturbed sisters born of sin who burned their family alive. The public closure was necessary for the valley to move on. But for Thorne, the real case was now a silent, internal one. He kept the broken cellar latch, the twisted iron a constant, palpable reminder of the ultimate betrayal and the desperation of Hester's fight for life. He kept the last page of Ilara's diary, the scrawled words about the twins being judges and the clean slate. The truth was a heavy, invisible weight on his soul. He spent the next few months trying to find peace, but the quiet of his office only amplified the phantom echoes of the Caldwell house. He found himself riding out to the hollow frequently, not to investigate, but to stand on the cold, scorched earth. One foggy afternoon, Thorne was standing near the former site of the well. The well was still usable, and he was checking to ensure it was properly capped. He noticed a cluster of new growth, small, delicate white mountain laurel, blooming unnaturally late in the season, right where the cellar door once stood. He knelt down, his fingers brushing the cool, damp leaves. Beneath the flowers, partially buried in the mud, he saw a final, horrifying artifact, a small, handmade wooden cross, no bigger than his thumb. It was identical in craftsmanship to the broken clay doll that Hester had made for her younger siblings. He carefully picked it up. Engraved crudely into the wood was a single, unsettling word: H. It was Hester's final, desperate attempt to reclaim her narrative. She hadn't run that night simply for life. She had run because she realized the plan, the purification, was a lie crafted by Hazel to secure her own survival. The H was a marker, a silent internal confession of her true role, hidden from the world, but placed at the site of her near death. It was a testament to her fleeting desire to leave some truth behind. Thorne realized the psychological toll was too much for the young woman. She had tried to confess her guilt to the earth itself, a final silent plea for forgiveness before she was claimed by the madness that was the legacy of her name. Thorne took the cross and placed it in his pocket, alongside the broken latch. He stood up, turning his back on Stone Creek Hollow for the last time. He had learned a profound and terrifying lesson. There was no monster more terrifying than a human being pushed past the breaking point by isolation, shame, and abuse. The terror was not in the fire, but in the calculated cruelty of the human heart, capable of turning self-preservation into mass murder and fraternal betrayal. He left the Ozarks months later, turning his badge in to Deputy Finn. He couldn't stay in the valley that had swallowed the twins, their family, and, in a way, a part of his own humanity. He was leaving behind the silent, unending legacy of a crime that was too real, too human, and too psychologically devastating to ever truly be resolved. The story of the Ozark twins faded into local folklore, a dark, realistic tale whispered around campfires, a warning about the secrets that fester and the ultimate price of shame. But for Silas Thorne, the horror remained clear. Two girls, born of a sin they never asked for, became the judges and executioners of their own broken world, their final act of separation being the most heartbreaking and terrifying chapter of all.